Conversation with Bob Pollock this morning brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. So here we are. We're the middle of May. Mr. Pollock, good morning.
Good morning.
You can call and ask Bob a question at 479-1160 this morning. Had a lot of questions recently, Bob, and most of them have had to do with some of the spring plants that come up, some of the shrubs and that didn't come up as purty as one might expect, and some garden questions as well. So folks are taking a look around their yards, and it's a different year in every respect. But this year has been particularly cloudy and not a lot of sunshine. Lawns just aren't catching up yet, are they?
No, they're not. Everything's been very slow. I mean, leaves on shrubs and, well, everything.
We should be full leaf on the trees right now.
We should be.
Yeah.
And we're way behind where we were even if we compare last year to this year.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's all been weather. The temperatures have been below normal,
yeah,
and so that's just slowed the growth of everything. It did, yeah, and they were really cold enough that there's been depending on where you are, there's been a number of different plants that had their leaves frosted.
Mm-hmm.
So those are wilting now, and they could be perennials. And some of those early perennials that did come up, depending on where they were located in your yard and garden, just in a little bit of a low spot, those could have really taken the brunt of those cold temperatures, and they might be looking a little droopy right now.
I want to get out into the garden, and in fact, that might be the big problem that a lot of folks are having right now, is they want desperately to get out into the garden and get it planted, but it's too wet to do so. Now, we've got a couple of weeks and even more before we have to get some plants in there in order to fix their growing season correctly. But what are the dangers of planting your garden when it's too wet, when the ground is too wet and there's not air in the soil and all of those different issues? What are some of the things that are bad about that, and maybe how can we get around some of those issues?
Well, when we have to mud the plants in, that usually doesn't bode well. We get desperate. We feel like we have to get those things in the ground, and whether it's seeds or plants, when that soil is too wet and it doesn't work well, you just have clods of mud there to work with.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really the plants don't like that. They don't root into that well. They essentially get stunted. When it's too wet, the seeds that you plant may rot before they ever germinate, or they'll start to germinate, and then because there's too much moisture in the soil, will rot. So you end up having to replant it. So it's better just to hold off. We have had some windows, although they've been very small windows, cracks in the window, opportunities where we could have worked the soil a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess for home gardeners, that's where the real advantage of raised beds, whether they're constructed raised beds or just soil mounded up to make a raised bed, can be an advantage, as well as pots. Perfect year for that. Because if you had things that you started in pots, when we did have the really cold nights, you could have moved those plants, or it was been a little bit easier to protect them versus being out in the open, out in the garden, in a larger area. That makes it more difficult to cover things and protect them, and sometimes we just can't protect them. You take your chances and go. Then if you have to replant, you replant. But when that soil's too wet, it doesn't work well. It doesn't break up well. You tend to get big clods, and then when you do try to seed things or plant, now if you're planting transplants, it can be a little easier because you can dig down in amongst the clods and get to some looser soil that can go around those plants. But sometimes if you try to mud it in, you end up with gaps in there, air pockets, and then when the roots do try to grow out, they grow into the air, and then they end up dying.
Yeah. Hey, we have a caller this morning. Let's see what's on her mind. Good morning.
Good morning. I planted a pussawilla I thought it was a bush. It's more like a tree. It's way many feet high. Can I cut that down all at once, or do I have to cut it down? It bloomed really pretty this year, and I like to bring them in at Easter time with my daffodils and stuff, but they were up so high I couldn't even reach them.
How about that?
Yeah, those, they can get bigger for sure.
Yeah, it's going up instead of out. I thought it was more like a bush. It looks like a tree.
Well, they should be more shrubby, but
can I cut that all at once or no? Like down?
But do you want to keep it though? You want to keep it?
Oh yeah, I want to keep it. Yeah.
Okay. So she wants a height that is going to be acceptable to her.
Yeah. So I would not just whack the thing completely back. I would try to kind of keep the kind of look at the structure of it and then
like all the
just
green
kind of
seems to
shorten
be,
it.
There is a little bit down at at the base, but most of it's all up at the top.
Yeah, and because it is you can do it more severely.
I don't want to kill it because it had really nice pussy willows, but they were all up at the top. I couldn't even reach them.
Yeah. So you can trim that thing back, and they will take some pretty heavy pruning.
Okay.
Try to keep some. Yeah, it's a little hard to explain, but you can shorten it back. You can also thin out branches to make it so it's not as tall, and then that might also then encourage it to send up some more shoots from the base of the plant and make it a little broader than this one seems to be growing.
Is it typically that it will grow tall like that instead of branch out like she would like it to?
Some of that, is it out in the open, or is there any shading there?
No, it's mostly out in the open. It's by I planted it near the like a little run because they said they need a lot of moisture.
Oh, okay. So she's got a run going through the yard there.
It's in the yard. It's in the yard, but there's a run that goes down, pretty close to it.
Yeah, they don't have to have those conditions. They can handle more moisture, but they don't have to have that. And they can get up to 20 feet tall if you let them, and depending on the particular cultivar that you might have. And they can spread anywhere from 4 to 12 feet wide too. So there's a pretty big variation there in how they'll do. So yeah, that's good. They're out in the open. Sometimes when we get shading from other plants or where they only get partial shade, they may try to stretch more, grow up more to reach the light and not be as broad.
It's out by itself, so it's
yeah. So it might just be
you can prune it back if it's getting too big. It will force some growth from the bottom, so you can be a little bit more aggressive with this plant than you can some other ones.
Okay.
For sure.
Now, can I do that now that it's still
green?
Yeah,
you could still do that now.
The pussy willows are done now, so can I?
Yeah.
I can do it now.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
There you go. That was an interesting question because you mentioned something there to her that I thought was instructive. You said that depending on the particular cultivar that you have, which to me means, okay, it's a particular variety of this particular plant as opposed, and if she had gotten a different one, maybe it would have been a bush that went wider as opposed to taller. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. So there's not a lot of different varieties or cultivars of pussy willow, but they're always making improvements to things, and so depending on which one you have, some might be more like the species, which may get bigger, and then if a lot of times when they make improvements, it might be for size, where they're smaller, more dwarfing effect, or flower color or something like that.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you one question before we're done here this morning. And I know you've gotten us some really good bee experts in the past, and maybe we'll have to hook up with one of them again soon. But these murder hornets that we're hearing about, they're on the West Coast right now, and everybody's afraid of them because they eat the honeybees. They attack the honeybees. They say they can wipe out a colony of honeybees in no time. Do you follow those sorts of developments, watch them, and see what the latest science is on them?
Yes, and really that thing got blown out of proportion. We probably should have never heard about that because it is really isolated to a couple spots out in the western part of the country, and they're working very diligently out there to keep that in check and eliminate it if possible. So it's not a concern here. Now, how could it be a concern here would be maybe if somebody from the East Coast hauls truckloads of bees out to the West Coast, maybe to use in pollination services, and then when they're done there, brings them back east. If some of those hives were able to get infected or something like that, that could be a means of transporting that pest elsewhere.
Yeah.
But when they did find that was the first time that they found that, and so they're really scouring the area there and looking at things to hopefully make sure that it doesn't expand any farther than where it was.
Yeah, my goodness, though, when you see a 2-inch long bee with a name like murder, it's like they must. If I had a name like Murder Hornet, I'd get that tattooed on my little bee wing there just to show people how cool I was.
Yeah, and that was another thing. Their choice of words,
Murder Hornets.
Yes, made it sound bigger than life. They're actually called Asian giant hornets.
That's much better.
Yeah, and we actually, one of our entomologists actually made up a fact sheet on that because, just out of the blue, he was getting numerous calls regarding that, and so actually he made up a very nice fact sheet that's available on the web. Just type in Asian giant hornets in Penn State, and that'll come up, and he does have some very good pictures in there that compares the Asian giant hornet to our European hornet, and also the cicada killer, so you can kind of see some size comparisons there. But our big bald-faced hornet is kind of dwarfed compared to the Asian giant hornet.
All right, there you go. Thank you, Bob.
Hey, you're welcome.
Have a great
Thanks
weekend.
for the opportunity. You too.
Okay.
The opportunity. You too.
Okay.
The